Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Talara Tales. Just while I was actually setting up for this video, trying to find some videos that relate to what we talked about previously, I actually found a video that actually sums up everything pretty damn well, everything that I talked about pretty damn well. So I was thinking of showing you guys this video that I'm talking about, which is apparently a Rift intro cinematic that was shown in the beta version of the game. Without further ado, I'm going to switch over to this video, and well, I hope you guys like it. And then we're going to talk about, you know, after this Talara Tales introduction that I did before. So we're going to talk about the millennia ago. Sorry, we're going to talk about the Bloodstorm War. But before that, this is kind of an introduction of what I talked about before and also the Bloodstorm. So, yes, without further ado, let's do it. And here we go. Tryon Games. Worlds, I mean. And I shut up right about now. I shut up. Actually, I don't shut up. So this is very interesting to me because this is like a visual that we never saw in game before. So this is really fascinating to me. But yes, so here we go.
In their great wisdom, the gods forged Talara at the nexus of the planes.
Too tempting a prize, it attracted the hunger of Regulus and his Bloodstorm.
With strength and faith, Talarans drove Regulus beyond the Holy Ward.
And by ingenuity and cleverness, the dragons were imprisoned.
But dangerous malcontents cracked the ward, protecting Talara from Regulus.
And the blindly faithful did nothing to stop the rifts from getting out of control.
So now, the mighty must stand beside the gods to overcome Talara's enemies.
And the brilliant must build machines for when the gods will fail.
No defiant heretic will unmake our world.
No guardian will tell us what our future will be.
We are the chosen.
We are the powerful.
We are the ascended.
Really interesting, right? I mean, I had never seen this video before as part of like the cinematics that were introduced in the game or before the game or whatsoever. It's fascinating. And like I thought it was very interesting that they summed it up like as part of the beta so people would be already familiar with the lore of the game, at least a little bit. And yeah. So next, we are going to have, besides the generic introduction lore, we're gonna have like the intro cinematics that are shown for each side of each faction of the game. So for Defiance, I'm gonna start with Defiant because I have a little bit of a bias for Defiance because I am one. I mean, I have what like one or two. A couple of guardians, but most of my main is a defiance, so might as well show a defiant first, right? Or should I just keep it for later because save the best for last? I don't know. Nah, I'll show defiant first. So next we have the defiant intro cinematic, and go.
We couldn't stop them. Without Ascended, we just weren't strong enough. I wasn't strong enough. The Guardians branded us heretics, destroyed our machines, and left us helpless against what was coming. Invaders from the rifts swept through the world like a plague. They crushed the Guardians, and then all of Talara fell before them. In their wake came the most ancient of evils. Regulus, the Destroyer. With no one left to stand before him, he devoured everything. But there is one last hope. We survivors have made our stand and successfully engineered a new Ascended. You are our masterpiece, Defiant. The fate of Talara rests on your shoulders. You must not fail.
So yeah, that's the cinematic that you see when you finally finish up with the tutorial phase of the Defiant faction. So when you reach level 10, then you're shown this cinematic, and you go off into the past. Sorry, you go back into the past because Defiants are basically machine born created in the future to save the past, right? So I was just thinking about it during this video, and it's like, no, it's kind of like these videos that I'm showing you, they're kind of like a recap of what I talked about in the previous part with, the gods and um the vigil creating Talara, the nexus of the planes, and blah blah blah. So yes, it's a recap of what I talked about in the previous video, but it's also segueing into what I'm going to talk about in this video after these cinematics. So next we have the Guardian cinematic, and go go go.
The king of Mythosia would have sacrificed the world to Regulus, the Destroyer. The faithful rebelled against his heresy. We overthrew the tyrant and put his armies to the sword. Defeated in battle, he turned to the machines of the Defiants. Their devices drew upon the power of the dragon, a power they could not control. This is the day the rifts came. This is the day we die. But the gods of the Vigil intervened. Their messengers went among the fallen and ascended the worthy, not for their virtue, but for their might. In you, they place their faith, their hope, and their power. You are our salvation. You are a guardian.
And that's it. Now, I like how during the video it talked about was it that was talking? I think it was Cyril. I think it was Cyril that was talking. The big voice. I see. It says in the video in this cinematic that the guardians were the ascended guardians were not chosen for their virtues, so for their religious beliefs. They were chosen for their might. And I remember reading about on the forums or on Discord something. I remember reading somebody's comments saying like, oh, we were chosen because of like people play guardians because of their religious beliefs, like they might be Christians or they might be this or they might be that, and they play it because they're strong believers and so on. Now, I mean, I knew a lot of players in my guild that were actually not religious at all, but they liked the whole, chosen for their might status. They really liked the whole idea of, yes, we have, earthly beings, and it's all about the spiritual beliefs, but it's also about more than just the spiritual beliefs. So, people who play Guardians, they don't play it just because of their spiritual beliefs. They play it because of, what their spiritual beliefs also get them to do, not make them do, but what their spiritual beliefs also allow them to do. in terms of, it's your belief that also gives you strength. But it's not just your belief that gives you strength, it's also your might. So anyways, it was an interesting conversation. It was an interesting argument. Um because somebody had written an article about, like, oh, you play Guardian just because you're a spiritual believer, but it's not just that. It's also about more than that. So anyways, Guardians are not just about the spiritual. They're also about uh the earthly, um the earthly actions. So anyhow, next, what do we have? What do we have? What do we have? I think that was it. Yeah, that was it for the trailers, for the cinematics. So I guess, this kind of really gave you a good recap of what happened, with Talara being built at the Nexus, and what the Guardians stand for and what the Defiance stand for. Um, we're gonna talk about the Guardians and the Defiance much later, but I wanted to talk about, the Bloodstorm themselves. Who are the Bloodstorm? Now the Bloodstorm War took place in, between 1500 to 1,000 years before the events of, day one of Delara, like the game play. So yeah, we have quite a bit of stuff to cover, but basically we're going to get through it very slowly, but we're gonna get through it. So the Bloodstorm are the dragons. The dragons are Regulos, Crucia, Mailforge, Lathis, Achilleos, and Greenscale. I always forget one, and it's usually Greenscale, but Greenscale as well. If I remember correctly, I think Greenscale was the first. Greenscale's Blight, I think, was one of the first raids. So it's kind of, whoops, forgot him. um, Anyways, so the Bloodstorm, they are otherworldly beings. They come from outside of Telara. They are actually denizens of the cosmos, and in my opinion, they're kind of the opposite of the Vigil, in that they are the polar opposite. They stand for everything that the Vigil stands against. In any case, so we have oh, and I also wanted to plug in. I also wanted to plug something that I've been working on. So everybody, most people know. I think if you've paid attention to the previous video, a lot of people will have noticed that I do have a Telara Tales. So I have a big ass Google Docs that is 135 pages right now. I think as of last week it was 122. But every other day I try to work a little bit, like sentence by sentence sometimes, but also sometimes it's like section by section, so I'll be like reworking every little bit. So currently I'm actually working on uh pretty much Elsbeth, but I'm also conjointly working on stuff from Storm Legion. So it's like it's a big ass it's a big undertaking, and I'm very aware of how much work it is, and I'm very much aware of, yeah, it takes a lot of time to get through this, and it's very complex because the lore intertwines. Every storyline kind of intertwines in some way. So, we talk about the Akvan as early as pretty much Storm Legion, when we start like wondering who Achilleos is. But it's like, well, in the introduction of the Bloodstorm, I don't exactly focus on Achilleos as an Akvan. Now, if you don't know about the Ogvan, you don't know about Achilleos being an Ogvan, so I kind of try to introduce it slowly but surely throughout like these tales that I'm writing and compiling. Now, most of this document is actually not me writing; it's me compiling info from different websites. So whether it be from Rift Zom, whether it be from Magello, whether it be from Telarapedia, which was a Wikipedia that was kept up for pretty much during vanilla, and that's it. So some of the stories are from Telerapedia. A lot of the content is from a Google Docs that a French person had written. So a lot of the early stuff, like vanilla stuff, was written by this French person. Now I speak French. I'm French Canadian, so I kind of translated it for myself at first, and then I realized, well, why not share this? Because I as I translated it, I started getting interested in the lore. And so I decided to, once I got a lot of the, vanilla, but also Storm Legion, and also a little bit of Nightmare Tide, and a little bit of Prisoner Prisoner of Azkaban, Prophecy of Ankhet. So once I started getting, the blueprint of all of the expansions and vanilla, then I was like, well, might as well share it. And so yeah, it's grown to 135 pages right now. But so yes, and basically last week I launched Talara Tales, and so if you want to go and check it out, it's basically talaratales.wordpress.com, and so you'll get to this website, which currently has up to the fall of Hammernell. And so yeah, I've been basically like not pre I've been transcribing and copying and not transcribing. I've been copying the content from the Talara Tales doc onto this WordPress website so that it's, bite sized, and so that you can just check it out at your own convenience. But right now, we're going to get through this Bloodstorm War thing, and hopefully, you can stick with me until the end. Now, I'm standing right now on the crater that was left by the ward's explosion when Regulus was unleashed onto Telara for a second time, and so this is the crater in Stillmore, and currently it has a death rift right at smack dab in the middle. If I remember correctly, this death rift is basically there most of the time. So yeah, let's read now. Let's have a little bit of a story time. Now, there's this little bit of tidbit where it's basically me copying directly. So there is this bit called "The Bloodstorm roamed the cosmos, cracking worlds for their source stone like marrow from living bones. Their trail of annihilation led them to Talara, and, in the forms of vast dragons, the Bloodstorm fell upon our world in a frenzy of greed." Now, like I said, the Bloodstorm, they're not from Talara, they're from outside, they're from the cosmos. We don't know exactly where from, although, if I remember correctly, it's been indicated that, the dragons, they are avatars of their planes. So I think, if I remember correctly, like it was indicated that they were mere dragons. They were just dragons, kind of like in WoW, where the um, the aspects. Wow, why am I always going to WoW? But basically, so they were kind of like the dragon aspects in WoW, where they were just dragons, and then somehow they became more powerful and started becoming the persona of their plane. So their plane gave them power. We don't know exactly how, we don't know why, we don't know what reason, but they basically became personifications of their respective planes. So Regulus became the personification of death, of the death plane. Lathis became the personification of the earth plane. Crucia became the personification of the air plane. Greenscale became the personification of the life plane. And Mailforge became the personification of the fire plane. Now, Achilleos is different. We're not going to really talk about too much of that, but basically, he's sort of a personification of the water plane, but not really, because he's not really a dragon. Anyways, we'll get to it eventually, but not right now. So yes, they roamed the cosmos. They started getting hungrier. You know, more powerful, you become hungrier for something else. And so Source Stone is basically the lifeblood of each planet, and so they started cracking worlds for the Source Stone in the planets. And hungry, 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 they started annihilating everything that they came upon. Regulus wanted the annihilation of everything, and I think pretty much Melforge too. You know, he's all about chaos and war and, well, death. Now, the Bloodstorm are alien dragons, known as the Bloodstorm for the violence they inflicted upon the world, that invaded Talara through the Infinity Gate. Now, the Infinity Gate is a God engine. We're going to talk about that later. I don't have too many. I don't recall too much about the Infinity Gate. All I recall is that it's a God engine and built by the Empyreans. I don't know if I'm saying it correctly. The Empyreans. I don't know how to say it. They acted as a united force to dominate their respective planes and devour the Nexus plane, Talara. Now, I mean, we still don't know anything much about the Nexus plane. All we know is that Talara being at the center of all of the planes, like we're at the junction of everything. So life energy, death energy, fire energy, life energy, water energy, air energy, everything is basically joining at the center, and the center is Talara. So we are the Nexus, and we still don't know what that means exactly. All we know is that we are rich. You know, we ascended, and the Talarans are rich in, you know, they don't miss much. You know, they don't not miss. They're not wanting for anything because everything is given to them because of how rich the planet is. One thing to keep in mind, they were brethren, so they were brother and sisters in some way. Like I said, they were from their respective planes, but they started getting power, and with power, I guess, comes brothership, or what's it called? Fraternity and sorority. But they quarreled amongst themselves quite a bit, and definitely against Regulus, their leader. Like, they always had a little bit of rivalry amongst themselves, but they also had, secretly, they harbored um, very angry feelings towards Regulus, who was the most powerful. Like, Regulus was the most powerful, and he was the one who was leading them in a very uh un what would you call it, like, not a very good way. One might say they each wanted his mantle of leader. You know, like they might have conspired against him because they were like, "Oh, but I would be better about I would be a better leader than he is. Like I would provide much more to the brethren, blah blah blah." During this infighting, with Crucia and Malforge teaming up to try to defeat Regulus, is when the mortals came in to imprison them. So each of the five lesser dragons saw in Talara the image of their own dreams and lusts, but Regulus, the mightiest, would not hear of leaving even a single world intact in his quest to devour all of creation. The other dragons of the Bloodstorm fell upon him, and as their battle tore the sky, Talara's people rallied. This was a little bit of lore from, I think, from Tryon themselves. So you know, each of the five dragons, like, especially we see this especially with Crucia because she's the one we've seen over and over lately. But Crucia doesn't necessarily want to destroy Talara. She wants to use it, and she wants to be loved in some way. She wants to be followed. Malforge, I don't really know about him too much, but I know that Lathis, she was comfortable on Telara. Like, she kind of turned herself into coins, and you know, started to want more. She wanted more gold, she wanted more diamonds, she wanted more you know, followers. um Achilleos, he wanted more knowledge, he wanted more um you know, mysteries, he wanted to know everything. Who else? Lathis, I talked about her. um Greenscale, he wanted to to grow. He wanted to he was so hungry. You know, he wanted to eat, he wanted to grow, he wanted to make things grow. I mean, Regulus is the only one that it wanted to destroy. And Malforge is a destructive dragon, but in another way. Malforge didn't want to destroy Talara necessarily, but Regulus really wanted in total annihilation. He just wanted the Source Stone and that's it, and fuck them, you know? Fuck Talarans. But the others, they were okay with Talara. They just wanted to use Talarans to fulfill their lusts and dreams. Okay, so, what's important to note is that, much like the dragon aspects in WoW, the Bloodstorm and Rift also began as dragons, like I said, nothing more, nothing less, and were later somehow infused or corrupted. Don't know exactly how. I mean, I would say that Regulus was corrupted because death, you know? But infused, I would say it's probably that. Like, somehow living in their planes uh, infuse them with power to become the dragon gods that we know. And by god, I mean worshipped by the cults, by the dragon cults. There are bigger gods in Talaran lore. We're going to talk about them much later, but they show up like throughout, uh, kind of introduced a little bit in Storm Legion, but more or less talked about much more during Nightmare Tide and during also Prophecy of Ahn'ket. We talk about them a lot more. But for now, we're just going to talk about, you know, the Vigil are gods and the dragon gods are gods in some way. I wonder personally if we'll ever see or learn how this infusion was done, how they were chosen, and by whom. Like, are there gods in their planes? We don't know. Or if there's just fell into a vat of toxic waste or something. I mean, recent lore suggests that the Bloodstorm are once closer in form to all the dragons we see on Talara, but the planar energy twisted and turned them eventually to the godly forms the Ascended fight. By that, we mean the dragons that we see, like they're basically dragons. Like they don't have any identifying features about them that make them different from other dragons. Uh, but the Bloodstorm, they do have these very defining aspects. I mean, for example, uh, yeah. So in other words, it mixed with them and warped them into their identity, transforming them into an avatar of the power they embody more than an actual dragon. Um, and for that, I'll show you guys like the images that I have. You know, this is actually a later avatar of Regulus, but basically we have. Do I have it somewhere? So many images, it's crazy. No, I don't have it. Hang on. Let's go Rift Regulus. So the first form that we see Regulus is this one, right? So we see Regulus as like a sort of human visual, but we also have his dragon form here in the back, right? So this is the dragon form of Regulus, and he's very different from other death planar dragons in that he's bigger. He's got, you know, these shiny sides, this purple illumination. He's got, you know, the defining features in the face. I mean, this really makes him very different from other dragons. And then we have sorry, let's go here. And then we have Lathis. I mean, Lathis is very different from other earth dragons in that, you know, she's basically emaciated. Like it's like she was flayed almost, and she has, you know, these she's basically molten almost, like she's made of gold. And then we have, you know, Malforge. He's got, well, we see him up there. This is Malforge. We see that he is a gargantuan dragon with tons of, I think these are eyes, and like this, he's got like a defining facial features that make him into Malforge and not just a regular fire dragon, you know? So he's the personification of war, of chaos, of destruction in a different sense from Regulus, who's like more about decay and destruction, like total destruction. Mailforge is more about destruction and, destroying something that's rebuilt and destroying again and destroying and destroying, but always having this cycle of destruction, whereas Regulus is more about, total decay. So, defining features of, war and like fearsome, And then you have who else? Right, Greenscale, right? So Greenscale is like huge. He's green. He's got this like he looks almost like a frog to me. He's the personification of hunger. He's always hungry for more. And then we have Krusha, who's basically the personification of, air dragon. Like, not air dragon, like not any normal air dragon, but she's the personification of like, I want to rule this world, Like those wings remind me of just like they're almost like scythes to me. Like I want to rule. I want to have my hands in everything. They almost look like fingers almost too, Like, I want to have my fingers in everything and I want to be the tyrant and I want to control. Yes. So those are the dragons. Oh, and Achilles. Achilles is freaky as fuck. that's how we can differentiate him. But he's not a true dragon. Let's leave it at that. We're going to talk about him later. So, yes, we have all these dragons, and now we're going to go back to this image. Because nobody really likes reading text on the screen, I do, but whatever. So, next. So, for example, Lathis had become more than a dragon. She'd become a live molten pile of coins. Regulus had become death so much that when he died the first time, his energy still strongly prevailed, which is why the Ascended of the time banished his energy far beyond the wards so that he could have no more influence on Telara. Achilles had become madness incarnate. Krusha had become tyranny. So, like, they had become the personification of uh, these adjectives, I guess, of these things that they personified. Oh my god, I'm not making any sense. But yes, so they had become dragons that personified certain things. When a dragon dies, their energy scatters into planar motes, looking for a new host to embody the planar energy contained within. However, one death mote wouldn't do much more than create a death-touched being. One would need to collect possibly hundreds of motes of the fallen god to recreate an avatar. What's interesting is when a dragon god is reborn is that it's not just that it's reborn, but it also takes on the host's identity too. So, by the way, Cain, when he was Regulus's avatar, which is, hang on, I'll show you here, right? So, oops, not this. Okay, so, the person that you see in the middle, right in front of the dragon, is Cain, if I remember correctly. I might be wrong, but I think this is Cain. And he is an avatar of Regulus, meaning that he's not Regulus himself, he's Regulus plus Cain. So Cain is still aware of who he is, but he's also super powerful. He's beefed up with Regulus's power, and he's got, Regulus's seduction that makes him into this crazy, batshit crazy asshole that we fight, right? So, yep. And next. Yeah, so he was still very much Cain, just with added powers and everything. Think of it kind of like Professor Quirrell being the host for Voldemort in Harry Potter and Philosopher's Stone. Well, Regulus didn't reside at the back of either Adraxis or Cain's heads, but you get the picture. It's more of a body claiming than a possession, if that makes any sense. So it's more like, oh hey, Regulus can't come to Telara because there's the ward that's keeping him out. So might as well just use his death planar motes and his death planar motes or have his spirit and his him right. So it's got all of what makes Regulus and it just claims Cain and not possesses him, because possession is like, you become the person that you are supposed to represent. But it's more like the power of Regulus claimed Cain and Adraxis in the past, and just made them beefed up on Regulus juice. Anyways, there's definitely more to the Bloodstorm than we know for sure, and we'll likely learn more about them in the future. Some sources call the dragon gods, and yet others do not mention this. I'm currently of the opinion that perhaps the Vigil and the Bloodstorm are two factions of mortal worshipped gods, one good, one evil, created as part of a larger cosmological plan by the gods. And by these gods, I mean the bigger cosmological gods, because we do know about the bigger cosmological gods. So created as part of this larger plan to temper each other out. So, yes, Vigil is good and the dragons are bad. In a weird attempt at balance. In any case, here are the dragons of the Bloodstorm and their description. So, yeah, let's hang on. I'll add a picture here so that you can something. Image. A Regulus image at some point. Regulus. Let's add something Regulus. Yeah, let's add this here. Yeah, let's add this there. Pretty. Right. Regulus is the dragon of death. What Regulus sees, he must consume, must destroy. As leader of the Bloodstorm, he prides himself on being the most powerful of the dragons. When they first arrived on Telara, he ravaged Duskin and created the Shapers. Now, Duskin we encounter during Storm Legion, so we don't know about, when we play during Vanilla, we don't know about Duskin, we don't know about the Shapers, we don't know about, the reshaping living things into undeath. Much later, after the Age of Dragons, they still controlled the quasi-totality of the territory. And by they, it's the Shapers, right? Regulus was so powerful, he was torn asunder by the Ascended, and his spirit was thrown back into the plane of death with the War Direct around Telara in the hopes that he would never be able to return to wreak chaos onto Telara again. But his cultists, mostly silent for eons, found a way to return him, and by return him, it's during Storm Legion. Next we have Lathus. Now let's have a picture of Lathus here. Lathus. Search for Lathus. Lathus. Sometimes I don't know how to type her name. Right, so here's Lathus. Woo! Right? So we have Lathus. Lathus is known as the Queen of Avarice. Oh, and by the way, Regulus is known as the Destroyer. Destroyer of Worlds. Kind of like in WoW. Anyways. As the Dragon of Earth, she represents strength and greed. She wants control and power at all costs. Shiny things, including gold, attract her like none other. Kind of like your average Rift player. It's hinted in Charmus Caldera that this might be where she was bound, but she melted down her body to flow out with the lava, and the Golden Maw cast her into things like gold coins. The Golden Maw essentially were bringing her to Ember Isle to Millforge's lair. Make eggs. Heh. Okay, a little bit of lore here. Once, in another world, there was a little kingdom by the sea. It was a poor little kingdom, but happy. The rivers rushing to the sea made the fields fertile, and the bay was thick with fish. Its people, who called themselves ogres, were strong from hard work and hail from good food. But the ogres looked with envy upon their neighbors, who did not work quite so hard because their mountains hid glittering riches. Time passed, and the ogres wanted more. They built a port in the bay to make merchants welcome. Soon, their market rang with tongues and coins from every corner of the world. The ogres lived in pretty houses, and their kings in a palace of alabaster. The ogres became fat from feasting, with thick, rough skin to better grasp at coins. But in other lands, the palaces were golden, and the houses were grand. Time passed, and the ogres wanted more. They sent agents to the other kingdoms to poison markets and ruin crops. They grew bigger and stronger and marched into other lands to capture slaves for the block. Their capital sprawled across the sludgy rivers, and their fish died in the poisoned bay. At last, all the wealth of the world was theirs, and all the other kingdoms lived in filth and squalor. But from their palace of gold and white stone, the bloated ogre's kings looked down upon their people and saw coins slip through their fat, jeweled fingers. Coins and jewels that could and should be kept in the palace. Time passed, and they wanted more. The last of those kings knelt his mammoth frame in a room that was wall to wall diamond, all the riches of his picked clean world hoarded in his palace. Since his grandfather had seized all the wealth from the citizens, the palace stood like a golden, bejeweled mistake amid stinking, starving squalor. He chanted, reading from a child's skin book, and called out to a great spirit of wealth and excess to come from beyond the stars and make his kingdom rich and beautiful, and his people hungry and powerful forever. Hungry? He prayed, and the Spirit came, along with her brothers and sisters. They tore that world to shreds between them, and as they did all the others they had visited. But before the lifeless rock crumbled, the great golden goddess of wealth plucked the ogre king's diamond palace and squeezed it in her fist, fusing it into a great gem of every hue that she wore around her neck. The ogres, grown great and fat and greedy, she took into the plane of earth to set loose upon her victims in a hungry horde. But how did you get all the wealth of a whole world to concentrate it to a single place? Asked Crucia in envy as the bloodstorm hurtled between the stars. Pressure. And time, Lethus said, and smiled mostly at the envy, and dreamed of unleashing her mighty new ogres upon the unplucked wealth of 1,000 worlds to come. Hang on a second. So, this tells us that the ogres were actually not from Talar. they are beings from another world that were placed onto Talara by Lathis as her agents. That's nice to know, eh? Next we have Mailforge. Now let's look for Mailforge. Mailforge. Mail. Yeah, we have it. This one, right? Mailforge. That's huge. It's on the picture here. Right. Mailforge is known as the Flame Sire. As the Dragon of Fire, Mailforge represents the power of aggression, eternal chaos for the sake of chaos. He revels in his own wrath. During the Age of Dragons, Mailforge claimed Emberisle, flying out daily to devastate Talara's coast, Mythosia, basically. At last, mortal heroes imprisoned the dragon in the volcano that had been his stronghold, founding an order of Kalari and dwarven monks called the Keepers of the Flame to ensure he never escaped. The Keepers fulfilled their charge for ages, but the rifts have set the world of Emberisle off balance again, cracking the foundations of Mailforge's prison. Now his thrashings cause earthquakes, and the volcano spews ash and smoke over the emerald jungles. Mailforge calls enraged fire spirits to his side and summons the wanton maw to lay waste to the island. Something interesting about Mailforge is that he is not the only dragon with this particular appearance, as Wargrath and Skarn are lesser drakes who have the same appearance despite being much smaller. So, when slain, his soul returns to the plane of fire as a being of pure lava known as Malferinus, that has the ability to possess lesser dragons and thereby transferring Mailforge's power onto them. We meet Malferinus. I think we only meet him in Prophecy of Ankhet, but maybe we meet him before. I don't know exactly. The notion that Mailforge is a being of pure lava that can possess other dragons is a dreadful secret that causes maddening paranoia among mortals. I mean, can you imagine? You kind of wonder, like, oh, are you possessed? Are you not? Or like, just knowing that yes, Mailforge is bound, but there's other beings out there that can be just as devastating, or slightly less because, they're not Mailforge himself, but they can be just almost as devastating. Excuse me. I need my drink because I'm starting to lose my voice. Here's a little bit of lore about Mailforge. Rough earth grips me, scraping my scales. Now, this is Mailforge talking, right? Jagged teeth of stone transfix my wings, wings that once fanned flame across eternity. They have entombed me, dull gray rock for miles before my eyes. Their crude magic drains my heat, dragging it far above, to ooze from the mountain whose weight has crushed me through millennia. These Talarans, they have forced sleep and stillness on me. How I hate them. In long gone eons I blazed from star to star, far ahead of my sisters and brothers, the void screaming, scorching in my wake. I would tear the cores from living worlds and gulp them down like beating hearts. And as the molten juice ran down my chin, warrior gods would come give me battle for the ashes of their dying creations. We would clash in the sky and the spaces between the planes. I slew them with great relish, and my triumphal roar blasted their brittle remains across the heavens. Some fought so fiercely I bade them rise and fight again. But Regulus, my eldest brother, held death absolute and snatched them for his own forever. We came at last to this world. I had heard of Talara's mighty god of war, and yearned to paint his death in glorious relief against a smoldering sky. But Thedior heeded his cowardly fellow gods and hid from me as they forced us to fight worthless mortals. The frustration. One snort of flame and armies shriveled like ants, and they could not even challenge me anew before Regulus claimed them all. Then Crucia whispered to us, "Why not turn on Regulus?" Ah, now this would be battle. But when we fell upon his bloated form, sly Crucia hung back, as if to direct us like some upstart general. I scoured her with flame, and then turned upon the rest of them, and together we clashed through the plains. Slaughter, agony, bright red ruin. Glorious! I lost myself amid the wreckages of kingdoms, and then, somehow, faced with a handful of paltry mortals, I fell. They drained my heat and sunk me in the earth, held so still that even anger seemed futile. Shameful, slothful slumber was mine through the ages. Now their sky breaks. My children rush from the rifts and kill. As I feel their burning steps upon my mountain, my rage returns. With rage comes heat. The stone softens around me. Heat melts earth. I am coming, Talarans, to fight you and your gods and all my brothers and sisters. And when I am alone, when I alone am the bloodstorm, you will burn and rise and burn again. How I will revel. Glorious. I love this. I love this piece, and I think it was introduced just before the Mailforge Infernal Dawn. So it was introduced just before Infernal Dawn, and like it's. I wish they wrote stuff like this again. Next we have Greenscale. Let's find a picture of Greenscale. Hang on. Greenscale. Green. Yeah, we have this one. Okay, let's put this. Woo! Nice. Too big. Let's have this. Greenscale! The primeval. There's no piece of lore, I'm sorry. I didn't find any. I'm sure there is. If you find some, let me know. I will add it to the Google Docs and the WordPress site. As the Dragon of Life, he hungers for everything. In the lore, the following is mentioned. At last, she heard the thunder of wings that stretched the sky, and a great green shape came down and feasted on the sickle horns. Which would suggest that he would feed on just about anything, even a sickle horn, which is, a baby. Excuse me. To keep his growth and life energy under control and prevent further destruction, he was bound to still more over a vast area of death energy. So, all of the dragons were bound by elemental energy that counters their own. So, Greenscale was bound by death energy. I think Mailforge was bound by earth energy, I think. He was basically crushed with earth. Krisha was bound by water, ice. Um, Achilleos was bound by death, I think. He was bound by death runes, if I remember correctly. Then you have Regulus, who was bound by freaking Ward because he's too powerful, so they had to kick him out. And then who am I missing? Blah, blah, blah. Lathis. I'm not even sure what she was bound by, but probably fire. I think, if I remember, Charmer's Caldera is all about fire stuff. So yeah, I think that's it. So next we have Crucia. Let's find Crucia. Let's find an image of Crucia so you can see her beautiful self. Crucia. Well, I only have I only have her human form, and then this one, the Crucia concept that we have here. But yeah, we encounter Crucia a lot in human form during Storm Legion. Like this, for example. But yeah, this is basically her too. So we have her face there, and then her dragon self here. Crucia is known as the Broodmother. As the Dragon of Air, her special power is mind control, and she craves tyranny and dictatorship. Kim Jong-un would be a perfect Crucia, I think. Crucia wants everything. She wants an empire. She wants to be adored. She wants people to follow her, right? So that's why she doesn't necessarily want to destroy Telara. She just wants complete control. Due to her terrible envy, like we saw in the Lathis story lore, she was envious of Lathis for having basically a pocket full of a world almost. So due to her terrible envy, she can trust people into serving her because in the end, if you can't earn it, then you just take it, right? And basically, she's during Storm Legion, we find I shouldn't go really into this because right now we're talking about vanilla, but during Storm Legion, we find she wants us to help her so that she can destroy the other dragons with our help. Anyways, during the Bloodstorm War, she settled on Brevane and positioned herself as a goddess of the Ishoran Empire. She wants to control people, she wants to be adored, she wants to have an empire. So that's what she did. She became a goddess to them, to the Ishoran people. When part of the population rebelled against her tyranny and hid behind a magical barrier, she abandoned Brevane and turned to Mythosia. The Eternal City prospered, sheltered behind their ramparts, while the Ashorans were absolutely decimated. And the Eternal City is basically in the middle of Brevane, if you remember the map, right? So it's full of life energy, and it's pretty rich in culture and so on. In Mythosia, she ravaged the lands of the High Elves, which provoked the secession of part of the survivors. Faced with this destruction, the Kalari elves turned from Tavrold to search for a more direct protection from the spirits and minor gods. Exiled, because the other high elves, they were just like, the fuck, why don't you believe in the gods anymore? So because they were seeking a more direct protection from the spirits and not from the gods who are outside of Telara, the spirits are on Telara, and so they wanted something more direct. They took to the sea and settled on Ember Isle. Crucia was later imprisoned deep into the ice. Read icy water would contain and negate her powers, like I talked about before. Near the Chancel of Labours in Iron Pine Peaks, a deed performed by Phineas Rothman, the first pyromancer, and Ekihard. I don't know if I'm saying his name right, but Ekihard, first of the shamans blessed by Thedior. Here's a little story about Crucia. Regulus the Destroyer, the Devourer of Worlds, and Dragon God of the Plane of Death, is afraid. He fears Crucia's Storm Legion, whose power and numbers swell with ancient and powerful magitech. He recoils from her mind, her ability to invade, persuade, and compel. He obsesses over the rumors of her discovery. What matter his pale warriors for her disciplined legion? How can shades and corpses withstand her sea of mechanical aberrations? How might he murder her in her prison before she escapes to a distant continent shrouded in storms that do her bidding, protected by an army set to cross the plains? Though Crucia lies bound beneath Ironpine Peak, her icy tomb, cracked with the sundering of the ward, cannot contain her powers of mind and thought. She converses with emissaries and ambassadors through the voices of her captors. From watchman to magister to courtesan to king, she reaches into the affairs of the ascended, using guardians and defiance as cogs to hasten her release. Regulus knows her machinations are accelerating. First, she unmade the Bloodstorm, turning Maelforge against his own just when victory over Talara seemed assured. Next, Next, she inspired the escapes of of her trapped brethren so that they might stand and be slain in turn. Now she sets into motion a plan to remake the fabric of the plains and loose her armies on all who oppose her dominion. Crucia's puppets spread rumors of what lies ahead. They describe how winged metal beasts will cut through the Ascended as the Dragon of Air makes her escape, how titanic colossi will incinerate those who oppose her flight. They shout that time runs thin and that only one path remains. All should embrace her call and heed her summons to the gate. So, from what I understand, this story is actually before Storm Legion, and isn't it? No, it's right after the Bloodstorm, right after the Bloodstorm War, I think. And I think it's him talking like from the plane of death where he's trapped, right? So he knows that she's actually plotting to overthrow all of them, to overthrow all of the dragons, to make her escape and become the one dragon to rule them all. Not to rule them all, but to the one dragon. The one surviving dragon. She wants to be the only one. Yeah. And so she's very much into having Talarans join her so that she can be more powerful. This is during Storm Legion, though. Anyways, next we have Achilles. Achilles. Let's find a picture of this motherfucker. Achilles. Yeah. Yes, we have his face. His beautiful face. Right, so we have his face here. Achilles is known as the Profane. The dragon, and here I wrote a star because originally thought to be a true dragon, the Ascended later discover that he is in fact an Akvan who joined the dragons in their quest for destruction, and we'll learn more about Akvans much later, as we discovered about them during the Nightmare Tide expansion. He took the Dragon of Ice's place, Iskinra. So Iskinra was actually the Dragon of Ice, the original part of the Brethren. But she was otherwise indisposed during the Bloodstorm War, as she was imprisoned in the Plane of Water by the Sharax, who we also learn about in Nightmare Tide. So, all of that much later, sorry. But right now, the dragon, quote unquote, of water, he has the power of madness and a deep thirst for knowledge, secrets, and magic at all costs. Achilles waits beneath one of Talara's greatest shames, a place of terror, darkness, and forbidden rune magic, Hammerneld Fortress. He sleeps and he dreams, remembering endless eons, marauding through the cosmos with a bloodstorm, learning every tragic secret, every evil spell, sipping the nightmares of dying worlds, and always craving more. Talarans can comprehend the other dragon's urges to consume, to conquer, to hoard, but Achilles is beyond understanding. The living interest him merely because of what they know and because the tortured howls of Heraces sound almost like a symphony to him as their world shatters. He does not seek victory over men any more than the ocean strives against the land. I mean, he doesn't care whether they live or they die, he just wants to know everything. Akvan he was, there are no words for what he is now. Here's a little bit of lore. During the Age of Dragons, there lived a boy who sought knowledge of the Bloodstorm. He was a wise boy and knew that if such evil could be stopped, it would be through good intelligence. So he sat in his town's library in a tower by the sea and read, that sounds like a, like a movie name, in a tower by the sea, and read every tome and scroll he could find about the dragons. He listened to every rumor, every soldier's horror story, every old wives' tale. The other children mocked the studious boy. They were all eager to win glory in war, to thrust sword and spear into the dragon's scaly hides. The boy only shook his head sadly and said, "If you think the Bloodstorm are just big lizards, I hope you never see what's under their scales." The others fell into sullen silence when the leaders of dragon hunting parties came to consult the boy about how best to assault the horrible gods. At a young age, he became the foremost authority on the dragons, learning of them one by one: Regulus, Crucia, Mailforge, Lathus, Greenscale, and at last Achilleos. Confident in his wits and will, the boy recorded the ravings of madmen. He charted the patterns of the waves, and in his seaside library he read of the Deep Lord. Of this most perplexing dragon, he learned many useful things. Achilleus covets knowledge, all knowledge. He learned every hideous secret he could, and invented many of his own, refusing to forget anything he learned even when his vast mind became full to the outer limits of madness. When Crucia hollowed out every mind on an invaded world to fill with her own iron will, Achilleus gathered the cast off insides and sucked them up like jellied fruit. Between these feasts, he floated in the cosmos, singing along to the dance of the stars, and the stars who heard him went cold and would sustain no life. Like all the Bloodstorm, Achilleos' true form is an expression of everything he represents, and can best be described as the best way to peel a man is in one long spiral strip, like an apple. So strange did Achilleos become that even his cohorts found him unsettling, and his dragon form bears little resemblance to anything the sane would imagine. Like any true devotee of enlightenment, Achilleus is sociable with fellow scholars, so by night he would slither up from the sea and coil around the library tower. He would lean in through the window, his chitinous head filling the library behind the boy, hiding his presence with the silence of the crushing deeps. Only when the student closed his book for the night did Achilleus lose interest and retract himself from sight. The boy soon felt the hideous presence behind him, but would not turn around. Though he sensed the dozen eyes reading over his shoulder, he did not turn. Though he heard the profane murmuring at the very outside edges of his mind, his eyes stayed on the book, even when Achilles would let his awful tongue sway just outside the scholar's peripheral vision. And then one night, staying up late to study, the determined boy thought he heard his mother call him down for dinner. Moments later, the townsfolk heard something enormous splash into the water and swim away, and then a scream that would not cease. All they found in the library was a flayed skeleton, mouth open till the jaw cracked, eyes still in their sockets. They buried it deep, under layers of stone, but people who walk those shores can still hear it scream. To this day, Achilleos loves to visit those who study him, but that heavy presence behind them is likely only their imagination. Turn around and see. My personal understanding of that story is this. Perhaps the mother's call, which was an intrusion into the boys and Achilleos' sacred, quote unquote, reading and studying time, which acted like a bond that kept them on friendly, quote unquote, terms, seriously pissed off Achilleos, and he lashed out by flaying the boy and consuming him so he would forever have this human font of knowledge within him. What do you think? Now, originally the Bloodstorm would destroy planets in an effort to send everything to oblivion according to Regulus' whims. However, due to Tilara's amazing amount of Source Stone, the other dragons began to want the world from themselves alone, and fighting broke out among them all. This gave the Vigil and the mortal races of Tilara time to banish the Bloodstorm to the elemental planes and erect a ward to keep them there. Soon afterwards, the vigil went silent without anyone knowing why. Yeah, they weren't wondering why. Were the gods dead? Were they listening? Were they watching? I believe it is still not quite known, but I have an inkling that maybe they're dead? Human survivors from Brevane and Duskin arrived on Mythosia from the sea, dividing into two groups of different philosophies. The Mythosians stayed north and studied with the High Elves, and the Eth headed south of the continent, choosing a nomadic lifestyle and devoting themselves to survival through magic and magitech, which they had taken up again. The Eth discovered Source Stone's properties again and constructed war machines. They also developed new forms of magic like chloromancy, which was perfected by the Eth Archmage Kazuzu. And that, my friends, is the end of today's tale. Yeah, so I hope you guys enjoyed, and see you guys next time. And yeah, let me know if you want to learn more, if you have any comments, if you know something that I don't, if I made a mistake. I mean, mistakes are human. I'm human usually, and and so I'll see you guys next time, and maybe next time is another Tell Our Tale. Who knows? See ya.